Good afternoon. I'm Alfonso Montero, Chief Executive Officer of the European Social Network. I'd like to welcome you all to this online workshop webinar that we are organizing today. I am conscious of the fact that we are already at 4 p.m. CET, but I can see that there are participants still coming through. So what we will do, we'll allow a couple of extra minutes, and afterwards we will start. So good afternoon again. As participants come through, I would like to start by introducing myself and introducing ourselves, and also this session today. I'm Alfonso. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the European Social Network. For those of you who do not know, ESN is abbreviation of the European Social Network. We are a network, the Network for Public Social Services in Europe, with more than 175 member organizations in 34 countries. And we are organizing this webinar also in cooperation with Deloitte, to discuss ways in which we are innovating, not just in Europe, but this is also very exciting, the fact that we are looking across the Atlantic as well, innovating in employment to support social inclusion. We've got already more than 60 participants with us today. There are more than 150 registrations, so I think that colleagues are coming through. But we would like to start by framing this theme, framing this session, and explaining the reasons as to why we are discussing this here today. Actually, this is a topic that ESN has been working on for a number of years, and it goes back to the year 2007. This was the year before the European Commission launched the recommendation on active inclusion. This was the first document at European level where, from an employment perspective, the European Commission was promoting an integrated approach, and it was focused on 3 pillars: active labor market policies, access to benefits, and access to services. In this framework, we had a working group of directors of social services, and you wouldn't be surprised if I say to you that one of the key conclusions of this working group was the need to ensure that social services were part of the wider social inclusion programs and plans, where where there was a conversation and a better coordination with regular employment services to guarantee that people with whom social services work often, and particularly those who are farthest from the labor market, can be supported in a more integrated way, in a more targeted way, to be able to be fully included in society. And after the European Commission launched this communication 4 years after, there was a review that we did with a number of directors and a number of members in 10 to 12 countries. And you wouldn't be surprised again to actually realize that there was a moment in which active labor market policies were being very much implemented across most European countries. Minimum income schemes were taken off. And there were programs both at national, regional, and local levels. But again, coordination with social services was the weakest link across all the countries analyzed. And we've been working, shadowing some of the processes and the policies that the European Commission has been launching, such as the long-term unemployment recommendation in the year 2015-2016. And in 2018, we decided to look at active inclusion from another perspective, which was we reverted the whole thing, and we looked at it from the perspective of social services. So we tried to look at ways in which social services were leading and promoting inclusion and active inclusion programs from an inclusive perspective. So we were looking at how social services were trying to work as much as possible with employment services to support into employment or into different forms, maybe not necessarily regular employment, but also community works and other possibilities for those, for the clients, for the people with whom they were working on a regular basis and were farther away from the labor market. And we call this inclusive activation. And this was part of a publication that we launched in the year 2019. This publication includes a number of examples, also with guidelines as to how these examples, these practices have been implemented, and is certainly a way to understand how social services can play a significant role in securing the active inclusion of people who are farthest from the labor market. So, and what we noticed at the time as well is that actually the role of technology was very important. We looked at how young people were being integrated into the labor market, how apps could play an important role. We looked at from an organizational perspective as well, how by having some form of integrated systems, there was better coordination between the services. So in this context, we are going to be looking at employment also in the next European Social Services Conference, which is taking place in Malmo from the 14th to the 16th of June. And the topic of how employment and social services are working together and technology is aiding this process will be part of the program. And indeed, Deloitte is one of the organizations that is looking at this particular theme. So in this context, we thought that ahead of the conference, we wanted to give you a snapshot of how this might look like. And we are organizing this online webinar together. How will the webinar take place? We are going to be, first of all, listening to a presentation of a Deloitte's report on global efforts to transform public employment services. So I was saying earlier on, it's very exciting that we are not only looking at European countries, but we are also looking across the Atlantic. And we are also finding many similarities in terms of how colleagues in Canada are working in relation to how we are working here in Europe as well. And we will be listening to this presentation by Josh Hjertason, who is the global lead for human and social services in Deloitte in Canada. Afterwards, we will listen from Martin Lichter, who is a policy officer with us at the European Social Network. And Martin has been working in areas of long-term care, but also in areas of integration of minimum income and employment and social inclusion programs. And he will be accompanied by Alessio Arces, who is project manager and social researcher at ANCI Toscana. And ANCI Toscana is leading a project which is co-funded by the Employment and Social Innovation Fund. And we are part of this project called Reticulate, and again is around promoting innovative ways in which we can promote the active inclusion of people farthest from the labor market, with a focus on cooperation between different sectors. These three presentations will help, will incentivize the conversation that our next four panelists will have later on. Amira Bieber is project manager at ProArbeid in Germany. Alia Kamlani, who is a public sector transformation leader in Deloitte, Canada. Andreas Nicolaisen, who is a partner at Deloitte in Denmark, and Begoña López González, who is head of Asturias Observatory of Social Services in Spain. And Begoña is also from the observatory. They are leading another project in which we are also involved. This project is called Sheitu, and again, as Reticulate, is trying to promote the active inclusion of people farthest from the labor market in innovative ways, particularly with a focus on cooperation between different sectors. So with this, I would like now to give the floor to Josh, who is going to take us through their reports and through the work that they've done at Deloitte in this framework. And as we were saying earlier on, this will be one of the presentations that one of the themes that we will be looking at in the framework of our conference in a couple of weeks. Josh, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alfonso. And I have to compliment you on the correct pronunciation of my name. And my last name. It's actually quite rare that people get it on the first shot. So thank you very much for that. All right, so we're here, and I'm here really to set the table for a pretty in-depth conversation on how to promote inclusion via employment supports. Okay, go to the next slide. A little bit about me. So I am Deloitte's global leader for the Human and Social Services. We are actively supporting over 30 countries in the transformation of how they support the unemployed, the underemployed, and the precariously employed. This is a personal story for me and a personal ambition. My mother was 16 years old when she had my brother and was left to her own devices. And I have distinct memories of my early childhood of an employment services counselor working with our family to ensure that she had the childcare supports that she needed, to encourage her to finish school, and then encourage her to go to university, and then to help her find work, to the extent of funding her wardrobe, her clothes for her job interviews, and renting her a car to partake in those interviews. And that landed her a job, and that landed my family stability. You take that employment services counselor out of this equation, and I'm probably not here in front of you today. My outcomes are probably very, very different. So I have a personal investment in helping jurisdictions improve the supports for the unemployed, underemployed, precariously employed. And again, this is a very personal journey for me and my team. In Canada, we typically start our public presentations with a land acknowledgement. And so, forgive me and indulge me on this. We acknowledge that our global offices are on many traditional territories, including treaty and unceded lands. These lands are still home to many First Peoples, including Indigenous, First Nations, and Aboriginal peoples, the original stewards of these beautiful lands. We respect the long-standing relationships that First Peoples have with these lands and acknowledge the historical and ongoing injustices that Indigenous people experience and endure globally. Okay, so why are we discussing this issue? I want to be absolutely clear. Helping people in the journey to social inclusion and labor market participation is a moral mission, first and foremost. But there is also an economic imperative. And we know that, and this is research done by the OECD, that labor participation in labor force participation across the OECD has returned to normal, and in fact is at an all-time high on average across countries. Okay. But we also know that there is an increasing imperative to integrate those individuals who are far from the labor market into the labor market. And again, the primary imperative here is a moral one. It's the right thing to do for those individuals. But there's also an economic case, and that is the number of vacancies in the job market, despite the high rates of labor market participation on average, is quite high. But the inactivity rate remains relatively high in many OECD countries, particularly for barriered populations. So again, I don't want to understate the moral imperative here. It's the right thing to do for those individuals, but there also is an economic imperative. And more countries are focused on activating those individuals who are either barriered or who have been inactive in the labor market for a long period of time. And so part of our mandate in our research, so we conducted a global survey of more than 30 countries to figure out what are countries doing and what are the common trends and how they are trying to activate these populations. Okay. So again, the OECD calculates, and I'm a huge fan of the work that they're doing to aggregate these trends and aggregate the data. So do spend some time on the OECD website in terms of labor force participation, et cetera. It's a fabulous resource. But they've identified that 70% of their members' countries are actually in the process of changing their delivery models. And 63% are modifying their programs based on target groups and recalibrating their employment incentives. And again, since we are active in so many countries, we undertook a comprehensive assessment of what are those key trends. I'm not going to deep dive across all of them. I'm going to talk about them in a high-level way, and then we'll have opportunity to hear from our other panelists, for example, on specific case studies. But very briefly, those trends are holistic assessments. So the countries are actually conducting holistic assessments based on to identify individual needs. The second is they are moving to multi-channel approaches, and they're doubling down in their investments in digital as a means to channel more in-person supports to individuals who might need them. The third is the emergence of whole-of-person approaches. I would say the discourse is moving around the conversation around integrated supports and more talking about whole-of-person. And there's some narrative reasons why you would want to perhaps change the dialogue there. There's more efforts to engage employers and provide specific supports to help employers activate these populations. And of course, this translates into new contracting and partnership approaches. So I'm going to unpack these a little bit one by one, and then I'm going to talk to you about some exciting initiatives that we have ahead of us. Okay, holistic assessments. So public employment service organizations are introducing standardized and increasingly sophisticated needs-based assessments for job seekers to enable the provision of tailored supports. And these assessments are not simply focused on, for example, employability, but they're actually looking at risk of long-term unemployment and using these assessments to identify the necessary supports to help those individuals who are non-traditional participants in the labor market or who are presenting barriers. And the theory of change here is job seekers' needs can be identified more precisely. The supports that they are provided will be obviously much more helpful. And a key theory of change here is that effective assessment enables more efficient resource allocation to those who need more support. Too many of our employment service programs are basically a one-size-fits-all with a very narrow menu of services and supports without adequate integration with other programs. And so there's some really positive case studies, and I'm focusing on here on some non-European case studies in case you're interested. So in Canada, Ontario has developed a very, I would say, a very effective tool. It's one that's gaining some international acclaim that's focused on holistic needs assessment and looking at statistical analysis to identify risk of long-term unemployment, and then using that tool to calibrate the service intensity for those individuals. The idea is higher need populations get more personalized supports. And Australia has a similar tool, and again, focused on identifying the risk of long-term unemployment and surfacing barriers that can be addressed. Okay. Next. So if you're going to expand the services available to those who require more supports, that creates imperatives around creating digital channels and hybrid delivery models so that those who need less support, who have low risk of unemployment, who have close proximity to the labor market, can self-serve online. And so again, the OECD has identified the fact that 70% of its members are doubling down on their investments in digital platforms. And again, here, the theory of change is that will enable governments to focus their investments and resources on higher need clients, particularly with person-to-person supports. And there's plenty of great examples here. I'm a big fan of France and what they're doing digitally in terms of their Emploi store and their deployment of tools such as generative AI, et cetera. Thrive is a Canadian example. It's now available in 14 languages and is working in numerous countries. And it provides end-to-end facilitated, curated employment service support, everything from helping write a resume, analyzing that resume, and then using artificial intelligence to identify upskilling opportunities, adjacent career opportunities, and then providing a curated marketplace of career and employment supports, everything from online training to pathways into other programs that people might need through motivational, et cetera. It's a fabulous tool and one that we are very high on. Yeah, so happy to talk about that more in the Q&A. So what the trend towards digital investment is enabling is, again, more service intensity and whole of person approaches for people who face multiple barriers or complex barriers to labor market participation. And again, here, there's a moral imperative, but there's also an economic imperative. Too many of our clients, and we see this across the world in the jurisdictions that we're helping, are falling through the cracks. They enter income support and they languish there for too long, even with a mutual obligation. And so more and more countries are focusing on addressing root cause barriers and then engaging them into employment supports, and the proper sequencing there is so very important. We're high on a couple of programs here. One is the UK Changing Futures programs, which you may or may not be aware of. It is whole of person approaches. It is partially designed and evaluated by those with lived experience, certainly with addiction, prolonged unemployment, homelessness, and that's been a key feature of the design. Again, a very big fan of this program. And there's a couple examples in Canada. One is the British Columbia Foundry program, which we are also carefully observing, et cetera. One of the things that we're doing is helping architect the design features and the operating model for these types of whole persons approaches. And of course, if anyone would like to talk about that further, happy to do that. Another trend here, super important, is traditional and public employment services have really focused on the supply side of the labor market equation. That is helping individuals get job ready and trained up. That's only a piece of the puzzle. And in the context of these labor market shortages, et cetera, and the desire to focus on, and help barrier populations, more and more emphasis is really focused on helping employers engage, onboard, and sustain employment for these individuals. And Andreas, who's joining me from Deloitte, Denmark, can talk about the Danish case. And again, there's also an excellent example in Flanders in Belgium, which provides specialized recruitment services for employers to support placements for multi-barrier clients, and doing so on a pro bono basis. And again, I see versions of this model appearing in numerous countries of the world, and we're working on importing some of these features here in Canada. Yeah, happy to talk about that. So in many countries, and in fact, most countries, have contracted out their ecosystem. So they have third parties delivering services on the government's behalf. And of course, these new approaches and these new efforts to support inclusion require rethinking the contracting mechanisms that we have in place with third-party providers. You can't take traditional contracting models and effectively incentivize whole of person approaches. You need to think about your contracting universe differently. And so the key theory of change here is transactional and traditional contracting approaches are substandard and suboptimal in promoting client centricity and whole of person approaches for those with multiple barriers. And not only that, transactional contracting contributes to really high administrative costs, both for the government agencies, but also for the providers. And so we've done a deep dive on the emerging models, and just, you may not be aware, but one of the models that I'm particularly fond of is the model in New Brunswick, Canada, that is focused on its cooperative model, focused on helping individuals with disabilities. So providers are actually working more closely together in a jointly owned entity to streamline the pathways and to improve the quality and the integration of supports for job seekers with disabilities. I'm super high in this model because it's doing something different and recognizes that these populations might require a different set of supports. So again, my job here is a table setter, because we have lots of people to hear from, and I can't wait to hear from the other case studies around the world. As I mentioned, we have a new report. It is available as an embargo preview, so I'm very happy to get everybody here a sneak preview, but they need to reach out to me, and we will send that report to you directly. And again, we looked at numerous countries, identified what the key trends were, and then really focused on surfacing some of the leading examples. So please do reach out if you want to have a preview of this publication. I want to talk a little bit about what we're planning to do. So we are also planning to do a bit of an in-person meeting amongst some of the jurisdictions that we've identified. So adjacent to the ESN Network Conference in Malmo, the day before, we are gathering a number of jurisdictions from around the world to do a preview or a deep dive into the Swedish model. And the Swedish model has a lot of interesting features, but it's also been very successful in promoting high rates of labor market participation. So what is their secret sauce? And then we're going to do a deep dive in the contracting models, and then what does good digital look like in public employment supports. So registration is free. We would love to see you there. Especially if you're attending the Malmo conference, so feel free. We'll put my email address in the chat. Feel free to reach out. And then after the ESN conference, we're actually taking a tour of the Changing Futures program. And again, that's one of the, I would say, the most innovative and successful programs in providing whole of person approaches for those with complex barriers. And so we're doing a site visit into the UK to peek underneath the hood of that program. Super exciting. And again, if you're interested, this is a pro bono event. Feel free to reach out. I do want to take a minute. Joining me today is Ali Kamlani, who is leading some fantastic innovation in the labor market activation space here in Canada. She is a phenomenal expert in how to improve the performance of these ecosystems. And one of our leaders from Denmark, Andreas Nicolishin, who is going to talk to us later about effective employer engagement. So two more fabulous minds from our network of really thousands of professionals who are helping improve the performance of these employment service programs. Okay, so thank you. That's it from me. I'll put my address in the chat if you want to learn more about the programs in Malmo and London, or want a sneak preview of the publication. Please reach out. And thank you very much for your attention. And we were a little bit behind, but I think I almost caught us up.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Josh. Yes, I mean, it's really interesting to look at examples from across the globe, and particularly it's very important to really go back to some of the concepts and approaches. It's not just about coordination. It's not just about more and better coordination or even reaching up to integration. It's really about whole person approaches, and that respond to both the moral and economic imperatives. And certainly when we look at how we implement whole person approaches, this also requires rethinking some of the relationships between the different agencies that are involved in supporting people farthest from the labor market, and where in those relationships is where certainly technology comes into play, because of course this is aiding, this is supporting the process into making those effective. And some of the examples you refer to around artificial intelligence, around digital technologies, I mean, those are examples that we're going to be listening to at the conference in Malmö in a couple of weeks' times, and there we've got fantastic examples across the whole of Europe, but also from Canada, from Australia, from the US, and it does show how there's a lot of similarities actually in terms of both how effective, how supportive they can be, but also some of the key challenges around the implementation of those technologies in social services. So that we really need to also keep in mind, and certainly will probably come up in the discussion and will certainly come up during the conference. So thank you very much, George. Now we are gonna be asking Martin and Alessio. We'll start with Martin. And before we do this, I would like just remind you a couple of things. We've got 80 participants now, which is great. We got, I remind, of course, the speakers to keep your microphones off if you're not speaking. I also would like to let you know that you've got captioning for those of you who would like to follow the captioning, the subtitles, in case that for whatever reason our English is just not easy to follow. You've got that as well. And also, if you want to send any questions on the right-hand side of the screen, you've got the Q&A section where you can actually send your questions there, and we will try to answer as we go along. So give the floor now to Martin.
Hello, thank you, Alfonso, for your introduction. So yeah, I will present our findings of our latest activity on creating partnerships for social and labor market inclusion. And the basis of our activity, you already presented it in the introduction, but I would quickly just take back the perspective of the whole person approach. I quickly changed the title of my slide to, in brackets, whole person approach. That yeah, and so people furthest from the labor market, they may have several barriers from entering the labor market. And if you look at the Simpsons family, it might be, for example, that there are some different problems in that family that need to be addressed, although Huma has a job in a nuclear power plant. But you see different problems that could arise in the family and that needs to be addressed, so that, for example, Marge can also work because she's not working. After this little introduction, I take you to the latest conclusions of the EU recommendations on minimum income ensuring active inclusion. So the Commission highlighted that a significant proportion of beneficiaries of minimum income is likely to be long-term unemployed, and that persons lacking sufficient resources face multiple and complex barriers to inclusion and require individualized support. And the coordination between income support and income support policies and incentives to reintegrate the labor market of those who can work remains insufficient. And in ensuring effective access to quality enabling services is a necessity, and this encompasses services addressing specific problems of those furthest away from the labor market to help them integrate into society and employment. And with our latest activities, we wanted to find out how to create coordinated employment and social support for minimum income beneficiaries and long-term unemployed persons. And for that, we organized a seminar. We did a survey with our members on how they promote integrated support for minimum income beneficiaries. We had discussions at the seminar. on facilitators and challenges in integrated support. We looked at examples such as one-stop shops, and then we elaborated some recommendations that are in our report that is published. And I will present you some outcomes of the survey, 2 examples of one-stop shops, and the recommendations. We asked what can integrated support include? So which services do they include? And survey respondents highlighted that people in need of economic support, they mostly get, in addition to minimum income, access to social health, labor market and education services, but the labor market activation is the most prominent among the support provided, and then the others depend on the needs of the person.
Martin will come back. First of all, I want to thank you for this occasion and to invite us to present our project. We will speak about Reticulate, that is our project created on the creation of the one-stop shop, or call it also community center. I will take what Martin is saying because I think it's very linked to our project. First of all, who we are and where we're working. We are ANCI, Federazione Toscana. ANCI is the National Association of Municipality in Italy, and we are working in Tuscany. I hope that everyone more or less know Italy and know where Tuscany is. But we don't work in Florence, if you're asking, because Florence is a very big city and have a lot of different issues regarding this, the services and the employment services. We are start working in 4 different places that I have underlined to you. This 4 of the 26 part of the Tuscan region. We have decided this zone because they have also big city, but also have medium city in which you could find also a lot of villages that are far from the city, or you have difficulty to reach them. I will explain why we have chosen it a little bit on. But let's arrive on the first point, who we are addressing to. We are addressing to 2 target groups especially. First of all is the homeless peoples. We decide these 2 targets because we think they are like the one who could have some more difficulties to arrive on services and to be reached by the services. So we focus on them, decide that if we could do something that work from people that are farthest from service, maybe we could adapt it easier to the other people who have less difficulties. Start with homeless. I think all you know and you know what it means and what kind of difficulties you could have with these people. Especially they are particularly far from services, from labor market, but also have a lot of problem regarding health and in especially mental health. So it's very important to involve different service when you take care of their needed. And then arrive what also Martin is saying, that you need to create a different path, or less one path, but with different services to cover all the need and the complex need that people have. On the other side, family with minors are began to be a real issue also in this part of in Italy, because a lot of family began to start being the called working poor, and also there is a problem. Even if they receive financial help, sometimes this is not enough. I think you all know that if you give money to someone, yes, you will solve a little bit of his problem, but you will not solve all their problem, because they need also services. And also there is a lot of perspective there regarding the fact that people look at you with stigma. You are somebody that I will use a strong word, you are like parasite, or you are the worst, and this kind of things, it's very important, because if you give them this stigma, you could really create a cultural problem, and also you will make them far from the service, because they don't want this stigma. No one wanted me, I don't want it, and I think no one really want it, and it's not fair, because it's not right things. When we speak about one-stop shop, I will think about it. When we think about one-stop shop, we think about something that could be a one place, really physically one place in which you could find answer to your different needs. Because a lot of times when you arrive on services, you go in one place to have to meet the employment service. Okay, I have employment problem, issues, I go there, I solve my problem. Okay, I go back home. Now I have a health problem. I have to go on the health services, solve my issues, go back. Again, another problem, another office. And again, our ideas is to put things together and make you one trip, all services, or at least how much we can. We have tried to follow the European recommendation that also Martin has shared and also has talking about. Here we have how we want to make it function the things. We can't make every services all together in one old place. We have need not only a big place, but also it is impossible to have everyone in the same place at the same time every day. So we start with a minimum equipe, that is the one you see in the center with social and employment services, and then reach out every other services that a person could need to be to see fulfill her needed. What is the important things that a one-stop have to have, especially? First of all, accessibility. It's very easy to speak and to understand why this thing is the first thing that one-stop shop have to have it, because it's have to be easy to reach from everyone and from everywhere. Because if you are far from me, if I have problem to come with me, for example, I will anticipate some barrier. For example, if there is lack of transportation, I can't reach you, I can't come to you. And even if I want, and it's not say that it's real, I can't go there. And also, it has to be a nice place. I know it's like it's really it seems like normal, but it usually is not. You have to be in a good place to be comfortable, to stay there for a little bit of time, maybe also a lot, speaking with the operator over there from the employment and the social services, because you have to create this relationship, and this is the second pillar, so you could exchange with him or her your problems, your need. He can or her can understand you, listen to you, and create something, a path for you based on your need that you could and you know and you will want to explain them. So you need a comfortable place in which you could sit down, really basically sit down and speak and create a path from it. Cooperation and collaboration is the third and most important part of all this stuff, because it's I think you just understand, if I came here and I speak to you with my need, I want you to listen, and you have to take my feedback and cooperate with me to create a path that is perfect for me. And also, if you are from for example, the employment service, you could understand that you will need other professional from other services, so you come and or go and come and take them and bring it to this equipe more larger, and so you need cooperation also with them. But last things is the community. It's very important that this place is not only for, and make me take some brackets, the people who need only things like financial support, minimum income, employment service, but provide a lot of service that could be useful for community. So everyone go there because it's a good place, because I could fulfill my needs over there. And I not take the stigma that I was speaking about before on me, because it's very, very strong as things and very perceives. When I say this, I have created I create these slides only to make you, if ESN will send you the slide, you have the point that I have just spoken, writing a little bit, not only to have images that I understand it's very difficult to remind what I say without something right. To sum up, what is a one-stop shop? One community center with the hub and spoke structure, so with spread among various partners, but also who have an equipe minimum. So at least 2 professionals that then call other one with that are the spoke one. And then we have the personal need assessment according to EU recommendation. We are trying to do it. It's not so easy. Why I say it's not so easy? Because there is very different obstacles to the integrated service. We are loading it, we are trying to do it, but you have to you have to fight these things. First of all, the creation of the keep is not so easy because you have to make together a lot of workflow that are different. You are usually work with your path, with your law, in your term. And then you have another professional like you who works to do the same things, and now you have to cross your path with him. So you have to curve your usually worker. And that's not so easy. And also for other professionals, more professionals are called in the keep, more curve you have to do in your path. And also there is the feedback from the users. So again, I have to cross my path. And other things, the creation of a single one-stop shop could be a problem. Why I say that? This is the most important thing of the project, create one single one-stop shop. But as I say to you, we decide to experiment it in a place that have not only big city, but also small village around the big city. Why I say that? Because if you want to cover also that village, you will have to think about another way to reach them. So you have to have the most important, the main base of the one-stop shop, but then you could have some way to reach the village. For example, in one of the territory, they are start thinking about create a mobile unit, which is basically this tour operator going into a car and start walking around the various village to go to the benefit service and not to stay in their office at least. So it's very important to know how to adapt this concept. Then the big, when you understand the need of the people, then you create the keep, and then they come to the one-stop shop. But then they have motivation because they have found that you have listened when you can take care of their need, and then you say, okay, come to the one-stop shop and we could fulfill your needs. Another part is the standard form. If I give you a standard answer, I will not ask your need, and also I do not have any kind of benefits from this kind of project. And also there is a privacy issues that regard especially mobility, high mobility target, a homeless one are. So you have to cross data from there or things that you know about them from one place to another one. So you have to reach an agreement with the various territories. Here, the main buyer that I have just said, I will only show you really quickly because I'll at least finish my time. Here, the main buyer of everyone. If I don't trust the institution or I think you don't understand me, I don't want to speak to you and I stay far from you. If there is a standard answer and you don't answer me quickly as I want, I don't came to you. And if I came one time, I never came back because you are not listening to me and you give me a stigma, or maybe I can't reach you physically. Homeless and families are also have different obstacles. One, for example, is the problem of the residence. Here in Italy, it's very important to have it. And also the coordination between services and street services is one of the other problems for homeless or for families, for example, the stigma also that the family has from the services who are the ones who throw away children. This is the most common things. And last and not least, I have next step for our project. We want to develop a new role of social services that is not only assistant, but also proactive and confronting the housing issues and to create appropriate context for marginality, because we would not want to make them only enter the labor market, but working on their motivation and not only on competence, but also on motivation and the way that people came to us to have some support. I really go fast, I understand, but I hope you understand something. And if you don't, please let me know in the chat. Also, I will try to understand and respond as far as I can. Here are our contact. Write us. We are really glad if you do it. And we are really, really happy if you ask with something. Thank you very much. I hope I say more or less in time.
Thank you, Alex. Yeah, I think we understood something. I think we certainly understood quite a lot of things, and it's very interesting also that not only you are innovating in the region, but also you are taking some aspects of previous social innovation projects, like the two-figure approach of employment and social services working together that you referred to, which, for example, comes from the project RCC in the region of Navarra in Spain, a project which, as part of the work that we've been doing with yourself results we've talked to you about. And indeed, this shows those aspects of innovation which not only look at how you experiment, but also how you sort of sustain some of what you've known has worked elsewhere and integrated into your own context. Thanks for this. I'm gonna see whether Martin is now available to maybe take us through one of the examples that appear in the report that we recently published, and also some of the key recommendations before we move on to the discussion. Is that okay for you, Martin?
Yes, I'm back. My apologies for being absent for a few minutes. We had some internet problems. So yeah, I was just saying that most of the collaboration is based on informal agreements, and yeah, there's something to develop there, because it's not very safe to only have informal agreements. I wanted to show you one example of integrated working regarding access to employment and mental health. The Job Center in Essen in Germany has a collaboration with a local mental health clinic. A study in Germany has shown that 33% of minimum income beneficiaries actually have mental health difficulties, and it's a main barrier to access employment. And the Job Center has a psychologist from the mental health clinic in the job center, so that if in a counseling session between a job advisor and a person looking for a job, they see there may be some signs of mental difficulties, they can be guided to that psychologist and have a first analysis of the issues. And actually, many of those people have the first time contact to a mental health support worker, and are very happy that finally somebody tells them, yeah, actually you have a mental health issue. This is why you cannot get up, you cannot respect agreements with an employer. And then they can work together on this, while the job center provides then employment. And this is actually reinforcing both programs are reinforcing themselves, having a job and having mental health support at the same time. And our recommendations that we got from the seminar that we hold were that you need to formalize the collaboration between the different organizations working together in agreements. You need to identify the necessary partners for the social inclusion. You need to map the different support services and bring them together. Case management, joint case managers of 2 or 3 different services working together are a main facilitator of integrated working. And you need data exchange between different services. That can be through shared IT systems, have data exchange protocols, also for data protection reasons. The main issue that participants reported was they were not sure which data they can share between the public authorities, or even with NGOs or third providers. So it's really important to have these protocols in place. Of course, also joint training for the staff, so that they are prepared for the new way of working. And the best way to start working together is to have also a joint training together on how to collaborate with the other service. And this also can contribute to creating a joint vision. You can have a joint logo for your new service that is working together, to also show externally that you have now a joint vision working together to support people. And you should involve people that receive the support in the design of your service, and also the employees. They may also know how to best create an integrated service together with different authorities. Non-take-up is also an issue, so outreach should also be part of inclusion programs. And we had some best practices about that as well. And even if the person has found a job, after placement support is also very important, as you saw with the mental health support program in Essen. And then we hopefully have the necessary support, so that the family has the necessary services to be better integrated and into the labor market and society in general.
Great. Well, thank you very much. It's great that Martin could come back and could finish and could take us through the example, some of the examples that are there in the report. Martin can put now in the chat where you can find this report. Have a look. There are very interesting examples of how we conducted some of the questionnaires, then was some of the practices that we identified. Some of the key findings from the professionals themselves as to how they are managing the process of working with people farthest from the labor market, and also working across agencies to integrate different types of supports like the ones that Martin was referring to, and of course some of the key recommendations that from our perspective in relation to working social services with other agencies should put in place, particularly in the areas of outreach, reaching out to those most vulnerable in the process of supporting them, aided by technology and other innovative ways, and also the evaluation of some of those programs. With this, I think we've got plenty. We've seen quite a lot of action in the chat, so that's fantastic. It's great to see this. Plenty of information being shared, plenty of colleagues connecting with each other. Now we've got 4 panelists, Amira, Alia, Andreas, and Begoña, and we're going to have a couple of rounds of questions with yourselves. If anything else is coming through, please through either the question and section or the chat, please do let us know. So I'm going to ask you some questions. I'm going to start by asking you from your perspective, what is how you see the link between income support, labor market programs, and how this too should be linked to other services. We've seen in several of the reports that have been written by ESN how the link with social services is the weakest of those. So I was wondering from your perspective, how the link with other services, social certainly, but also health, housing, we saw the example from Reticulate, should take place. Maybe I can start with Amira.
Thank you, Alfonso. Maybe I should just very shortly introduce myself, if it's okay for you. My name is Amira Biba. I am the head of Department European Project Management at the Job Center Pro Arbeit in Germany in the Offenbach County. Why am I telling that? This department is very unique in Germany. It's a kind of place, innovative space in the job center, giving us opportunity to create concepts, exactly the concept we are talking right now, models on demand in the labor market, but also in society. Right now, I might talk about job center as such, because in Germany, of course, we have this great opportunity to combine all kinds of social support together with the labor market. So if we have people who don't have enough income, they end up immediately in the social system, and they have it is even improved right now after pandemic and all these consequences in the last 3 years. But I would like to concentrate on my own department, which is European Project Management, because we work a lot about combining not the social services, because I might say there are 2 different sides. If the person has no enough income to make sure that a family can live out of it, of course he will end up in this housing supports, that he will end up in a system that gives him economical help. But in this case, this person is out of advisory. So in case this person does not have enough, and that additional support of the social system cannot cover his needs and demands, he will end up by us in the job center, which I think is much better, because then in that case we concentrate on the support, advisory, active role to help this person going out. Because in the other system, actually you create a status quo. So a person is having minimal income, he's having some social support, but at the end of the day, you're not improving his situation. So what we are doing right now is to end up in the creating models, which are always multi-stakeholder models, to help the person to improve, to work more on innovative ideas and be motivated from self to change the situation, and sometimes also to change the job. I don't know if I did answer your question.
Well, it's the beginning. Let's see how other colleagues say it as well. So maybe I can turn now to Begoña.
Good afternoon, everyone. Well, first of all, I would like to thanks ESN for the opportunity of being here today, as well as to Deloitte Canada. Well, as Alfonso said first, I am the head of the Asturian Social Service Observatory, and currently I am liable from SHEITU, which is a project running since January 22, and it's changing many things in this area. If I have 2 minutes just to give myself a little bit of context, I would like to roughly explain what SHEITU is. We are making change in 4 areas, and I really think that is very linked with the question that Alfonso has launched right now. First of all, we are making a deep legal reform just to eliminate all the legal questions that are operating as a disincentive to the labor market for the people who is beneficiary from the minimum income scheme. Secondly, we are delivering for the first time in the region an integrated service delivery, which is a very important thing, which means that an official from the social service and an official from the employment system is working together to give a better approach to the citizens that require intervention from both systems. We are fostering a change of sign, which is very important as well. I think we are coming from a sign of very long period of intervention, but of a very low intensity. And now we are turning into a high level intensity, but very short-term intervention model, which changes everything a little bit. And last but not least, we are going into networks in the territory, which means identifying agents, yes, establishing all the channels to referral between the agents. And I think it's working quite well. Regarding what you were asking us now, I have to say that SHEITU is the sibling of a greater coordination policy. In our region, we have one very long-lasting coordination policy between social service and system and the employment system. It is been working now for more than 5 years, and it's giving us a very good results. SHEITU is one of them. We have as well a coordination policy between health system and social service system, as well at the more basic level. I mean, yes, giving the intervention to the people who needs the intervention from both systems, but as well at the strategical level, which is working very well. And I really believe that citizens cannot understand when the system are not able to coordinate. I mean, when we force citizens to interact with so many systems which operate under so many different logics, it should be very discouraging for them and leads them to fail in the relationship with the administration, especially when we are talking in our beneficiaries, which are people that due to their age or their educational level and the health issues, they are very, very vulnerable. I don't know if I answer your question. Alfonso.
Absolutely, you did. Absolutely, because you took us through, like Amira did, through some of the changes that have been taking place over the past years, which respond to the need to coordinate at least better and to move towards that whole person approach. in relation to some of the supports provided. And I was wondering, maybe if I turn now to Andreas in Denmark, it was presented as as an example, as a good example. I was wondering from your perspective how you see all this focus, all this link between income, labor market activation, and the roles of other services.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for the invitation to join the panel debate here. My name is Andreas. Just to give a short introduction, I've been working with employment and labor market policy for the last more than 20 years, both on the municipal local level in Denmark, building the largest job center we have in Denmark in the city of Copenhagen. I've been heading out the digital labor market services with the Ministry of Employment, and for the last more than 15 years working as an external advisor for the job centers and for the Ministry of Employment in Denmark. So been a little around the field for a lot of years. I totally agree with what both Amira and Begonia touched a little upon around this, getting the job or the labor market activation and the social security part to fit together. What we have been trying to do a lot in Denmark, and I think that has been the movement in a lot of countries as well, is to put the labor market activation first, because also, as I think you mentioned, Amira, sometimes one of the core issues is if you don't have any money to live for, then you're not able to think about getting your situation better in a lot of other areas. So really trying to put the activation part and the job focused part in front. So in Denmark, when you are applying for social security, the front door is the job center, and where you get your benefits is another organization on the back or in another building. So you first have to go into the job center. You have to talk about what are the possibilities to get some kind of job, maybe not a full-time position, but maybe just some hours to get in there. So really putting the job first. We ran as well a very large program called with the job title Job First, which was kind of inspired by also some of the methods used for homeless and other by Housing First and stuff like that, but really to emphasize that to work with the social issues around, you need to start working on the job part first, and then you can work with a lot of the other things around that. The program also moved a little further into a program with I think the headline on it was around individual placement and support, which actually had the focus on moving from the concept of then first train, then place. You could move it into the social area as well, solve the social problem first, and then look to job. That was kind of the thinking before, and then the new thinking was really moving into place, then train. So get the unemployed person, get the beneficiaries into the companies, into real workplaces, and then work with the social or mental health issues afterwards. So really trying to turn that sequence around and thinking job first in everything we do, and then trying to solve some of the social issues around, because they're really interlinked, and the economical situation of the individual is so important to start thinking about the social areas as well.
Thank you very much, Andreas. I mean, the jobs first approach is something that really it resonates a lot with Denmark. It's not the case everywhere, though. This is an interesting thing, actually. It's not. We must acknowledge this. Not everywhere is actually, you know, they do this approach, but certainly has been very much the focus in the case of Denmark. I was wondering, now if I turn to Alia, how do you feel about what you've heard from 3 different countries in Europe, and also, well, actually more, because we've looked also at Italy and, you know, some of the examples that Martin referred to as well. I was wondering, how does that resonate with Canada?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because these are very common themes, right? I mean, I'm a public sector transformation leader where I focus almost exclusively on labor market transformation, especially at the public sector level. And this conversation around the link between income supports and labor market programming is a very live discussion in the Canadian context too. And transformation is in Canada and North America is also really oriented around how to better, you know, recognize the links that exist. and improve the integration across these systems, because you asked at the beginning kind of what is the link, and I think many of our speakers have touched on it today. These clients are often shared across these programs, right? So it's not like you have a client in income support that never interacts and vice versa. These clients are often shared across the programs, which really requires a degree of coordination and integration and collaboration if we're going to serve them well. And in terms of the conversation around the range of needs, right? Often these clients have a range of needs. If they're on income support, there are likely housing needs or childcare needs or transportation needs or other supports that they are going to require to be successful, to be included in society, to feel like they have some stability so they can embark on an employment journey. And so really, I would just reiterate some of the themes we've heard, which is to do that well, it requires a more integrated approach, a recognition that often client needs kind of spread across these program silos and policy silos, and we need to kind of match that to meet clients where they are. And that really enables, to do that well, it means we're limiting the burden on clients themselves. I think, Begonia, you talked about, the fact that we're expecting clients in these often in vulnerable situations to be able to navigate different programs and eligibility rules and all of these other elements. It reduces that burden, and potentially if we can do it well, and this is again a policy question where we're working on in Canada too, you're then able to kind of minimize the churn in the system, potentially increase that motivation, that engagement with the services being received, and allows there to be sort of that concurrent or preemptive support, integrated supports around some of the more foundational life stabilization requirements that an individual may have before they can start beginning that pathway to employment, or and recognition that those supports across the two programs and into the broader ecosystem need to happen perhaps even after someone is employed, right, to be able to sustain their integration into the labor market. So these systems have to work together, and in reality, people their needs across the programs really continue over the course of their journey, and obviously their circumstances change. The more connected we can be, I think that's where we need to go, and that's where many governments in Canada are going to.
Well, certainly a lot of effort is being made in terms of ensuring that there is income support, that there is active labor market policies, that there are social inclusion programs, and that all of those are somehow more coordinated, that those working in the different agencies are at least aware of what's going on in the different places. Because, and actually Begonia was saying earlier on, just citizens can't understand that the systems are not coordinated precisely because administrations are actually putting a lot of requirements there on them. Now, trying to dig a little bit more on that, in your opinion, what is that is driving those efforts? What are the reasons as to why there is that increased focus? Maybe I can start with Begonia.
I was mute. Well, if I have to think about drivers, I mean, what is bringing up all this effort to change things? I really believe that we have the social and the labor incorporation is going to be key in the future for labor markets in many areas. Some sectors are already, in my opinion, facing troubles in hiring people. For example, here in our region, we are struggling to hire people in the personal care sector. And well, this is quite, I mean, caring, because especially in the most rural areas, we have not people to hire to take care of the old people who is living there. So we are really struggling to hire professionals for caregiving positions. And on the other hand, we have like a bigger volume of users of social services. It has been growing non-stop recently. So we don't know how, but we have like a shortage of people here, and then we have a lot of people here. And in the middle, we realize that we have like a lot of, as our colleague just said before, mental issues and health issues and loneliness issues. So we have to make something just to move the floor for these people, and just to make the matching between people who is looking for something and areas where we are looking for people. I think this is what is bringing everything together.
Thank you, Begoña. I was wondering, Andreas, does this resonate with you? Would you think of all the drivers?
Yeah, I think it resonates very well. I think everyone is over the coming years struggling with labor shortages in different. We really need to get some of the workforce out of also those outside the labor market. So that's a really strong driver as well. I think another very strong driver is, at least in the discussions I participate in, is also looking into, as both I think Martin and Alicia also touch a little about around the family part and the next generation. So what we're really focused on is also to secure that we are not fostering new beneficiaries of social security in the future. So really have a dedicated focus on the family part, and also securing we not have this generational kind of just moving the burden onto the next generation. That's really a focus area as well. And then maybe one last thing, which we hear a lot when we talk to companies participating in the active labor market services in Denmark. Companies are growingly seeing their participation in the social services and the cooperation with the public employment services as something which their employees sees very positively around, especially maybe the younger generation entering into the companies. They want companies to be active in their community. They want companies to involve in their society. And we actually see that job centers in Denmark are using that in their dialogues with the companies, and the companies are actively using this, also having people on in the companies acting as mentors, for example, on some of them with different kind of social or mental issues. So really using this as a positive thing to move the culture in the companies forward. And I think that could be a strong driver for us working for the public employment services to really leverage that in our collaboration with the companies as well.
Thank you, Andreas. I was wondering, Amira, is there any other driver that you feel is worth mentioning?
I think that in our case, we found out that this word awareness is very important. And we talk about person who is deprived and not in the labor market or not enough paid. We need to search on responsibilities, but also the efforts and interest of the stakeholders. And I think that nowadays that everyone really recognizes that if we just ignore the fact that people cannot live out of the income, it's not going to change. So we need to sit on the table together and discuss the responsibilities, opportunities, who can be involved in what, because at the end of the day, it's the profit of all of us. For example, we had a case with the mothers. You remember we have the European project Moms at Work, where we did a very huge, let's say, co-creation with mothers, asking them, what are your needs? What are your challenges? How can we help? At the end of the day, it was not enough. At the end of the day, we were supposed to ask ourselves, who can help? Because it's not just the job center or social security system. There are also companies who might be involved. There are also cities, mayors who might be involved in order to have to mitigate that gap between the need, demand, and offer. Because as Alia said as well, we have a huge amount of people on one side seeking for the job. We have a company seeking for employees. So there must be some reason. And I think that nowadays this awareness, this sensible approach made it very logical to be multi-stakeholder approach.
Thank you, Amira. I'm going to turn now to Alia, asking you whether you feel any additional drivers should be mentioned, but also moving on to the next question as well, which, the title as well, that Josh was referring to is families with multiple or people with multiple barriers. I was wondering, from your perspective, how you see public authorities are addressing this, and the question, how does a good look like as well? What type of recipe we can think of as well.
Yeah, maybe I'll just touch on two quick drivers that build on what the others have said. One around, I think there's a social driver that is, our demographics are changing. The complexity of needs is evolving in terms of, when you think about when our social systems were designed, a lot has changed since then, and the systems haven't really caught up in many ways. In Canada, I think in particular, there is recognition that racialized communities, Indigenous communities are overrepresented within these systems, and typically, relative to their peers, have poor economic outcomes in times of economic downturn, et cetera. So I think there's recognition that the programming that to support broader society and everyone needs to evolve and have perhaps a more specialized approach to recognize the diversity of our societies, et cetera. So I think there's a social driver that's also impacting our approach to some of these programs. And then, we haven't really talked about the technology driver. So there's a lot of change that's happening very quickly, in AI, automation, RPA, that's really disrupting the service delivery models in many of these programs. And some of that is, through the emergence of digital tools. I think COVID did a lot to kind of flip some orthodoxies around what we could do digitally. And that's not, again, to assume everyone can participate in a digital system, but I think it has created those hybrid systems, or that technology shift is really pushing us to think differently about how to use technology. And many jurisdictions, especially in Europe, but elsewhere too, are using AI to, do some service to client matching, RPA to kind of speed up and improve the administrative aspects of some of these programs to then create some space. I think there's equal recognition that there needs to continue to be these more person-centered intensive support still available, but how can you use that those technology drivers to modernize, innovate that service delivery model? I think technology is going to continue to play a big role in as being a driver for us. In terms of you asked, like, what does good look like, and what are public authorities doing? I mean, I think going back to one of the themes we talked about earlier, many jurisdictions are recognizing the need, and Martin and Alicia talked a little bit about this too in their examples, but the need to take a really person-centered approach to understanding an individual need, like that holistic approach across policies and delivery models is, one of the positive directions in terms of what good looks like, involving those with lived experience. So moving to a model where those who are service users, clients have the knowledge, the context, the experiences to be part of the process, whether that be at the beginning to help identify what the root causes are, but also as you're building out your programs and rolling them out and trying some different approaches, making sure you have those perspectives embedded, and then connecting our systems. So we talked a lot about the need for collaboration and integration, but the how to do that well is really about how you then take these very data-rich pockets across our system and make them more integrated. So how do you encourage, good looks like integration of data and data exchange and use of that data more effectively to have that sort of whole of person client-centered view as someone's navigating these different programs and services. I think that's one example. And in Canada, I would just highlight, one way we're doing that here, and in one of the provinces in Canada, Ontario, we're using a common assessment tool. So this is, commonly referred to as the CAT, and it's a digital questionnaire that's really intended to serve as a common intake approach, right? And it's being used by both the employment services program and the income supports program. So there's almost a no wrong door in terms of who's assessing your needs. Both systems can assess your needs. And that's really intended to, the tool is intended to identify client strengths, what barriers they may face to employment, and what their needs might be from a broader kind of life stability perspective. And that what that does is be able to surface, what referrals may be required then into the broader ecosystem. The intention is to be, again, client-centered. allow for that more consistent collection of information. So it's supposed to mitigate that challenge where, one program is collecting your information, then you go to another program and they're collecting the information, but maybe in a different way. So a common intake process, it allows for that more integrated view. And as I said, it's intended to be shared across these programs so that you have a common view and then of an individual's need. And then the other part of the tool is, of course, the segmentation. So I think, Josh, you touched on this before in your remarks, but essentially that tool then allows for service intensity, allocation of resources too, where I would say this is a leading example, right, where you're streaming your clients and what that does is indicate based on their risk of long-term unemployment, what level of support that individual might need. So it's a bit of a guidance to the provider networks here around what the servicing model should be, and that's actually linked to performance funding and outcomes in the Canadian context. So it's driving some different incentives than perhaps were there before.
Thank you, Alia. I was wondering, Begonia, if I can turn to you and ask you, from your perspective, how good would look like in terms of support for families or people with multiple barriers.
Well, what we have done here, it's something that is looking good, but it's a little bit early to just come into the outcomes. But I think it really looks good. It's the legal reform that we have launched. Look, with the previous legal framework, we established like an incompatibility between the gains from the labor market and from the minimum income support, and it was working against us in the sense that if you are a minimum income beneficiary and you receive a job offered, then you have to, unless it was excellence in terms of security and in terms of salary, which is not very common for these people very far from the labor market, you have to reject the offer because you have fear to lose benefits. So now we changed all the rules, and it is possible for you to be in the minimum income scheme and at the same time being at the labor market. This was very dramatic, especially with young people. Imagine you get your first job opportunity, but then your parents are getting money from the state, from the minimum income scheme, and then you have to say no to your first opportunity, and then the poverty is coming back again in the next generation. So we changed the rules, and then now we are just allowing people to get into the both worlds at the same time. And I really think that it's going to give very good outcomes, because we are telling people, don't fear the system, just go into the labor. And when you reach this point and you can go along, we will take the other money back, and it's good for us. You don't have to bring back all the money and this stuff. But I have to say that it's been difficult in terms of communication, because the fear of the people is still in mind. So now we are just working in a big communication campaign, just to say everyone, just go into the labor market, you have the other money granted.
Thank you very much, Begonia. I was wondering, Andreas, whether there is something that you would mention there. There is also a question in the chat about success in terms of bringing technology to employment services as well. So if there was anything there as well that you could refer to, since you've been working with job centers, please don't hesitate to answer as well.
Yeah, thank you. And really interesting, the story you're telling, Begonia, because that's exactly also one of the travels we have been in Denmark, and really trying to say that people who can only work a couple of hours should be allowed to do that and still have their social benefits on the side and getting something out of it. And that's really a movement. We just had a very large researcher commission finish that work yesterday. And one of their main conclusions were that because people were afraid of losing their social benefits, they're going into the employment system and making themselves having more trouble than they really have, because they need to protect themselves from getting pushed out in job. And I think that's some of the same things you are talking about, that really need to think of that. If I should say two things which have been kind of the strategic pointers of the Danish efforts around the most vulnerable groups in the labor market here, then we used to say that there are two things that works. It's reality works, and employee works, meaning that reality works, meaning let's get people into real jobs in real companies, even if it's only in a training position or in a few hours or something like that, because that's what really moves people toward the labor market. And then the employee in the job center is really the other thing that works here. So getting the relationship up and running, which I think Alessio also talked about with his one-stop shop, is really the other thing that works here. So getting a close relationship, getting the trust to make everyone trust that they could move into to real jobs is the other thing. So these two guiding principles is kind of what we've been looking into and designing everything around that.
Thank you, Andreas. I was wondering, Amira, concluding with you, does it resonate with what would you would say?
Yes, I think that in the most cases we are working, I can say that what works very well is creation of this innovation lab we did. So it works very well if you recognize, if you take time to recognize good stakeholders and you include them. They are very, very happy to be the part of the co-creation. They are very happy to give their efforts. For example, we have also one of the projects on mental health, where we include VT providers, clinics, where we try to include social services, but also companies and SMEs. And they are willing to help, so it works. I think that the only thing that we need to sacrifice more is the time to find the preconditions for these labs. But I really can confirm we have right now, we had at least 7 models we are working for non-migrants, on long-term unemployed people, inmates, mothers, mental health issues, and so on. So every time we ask stakeholders to come and to see their own responsibility, to co-create VT trainings, to co-create qualifications, it works. It did always work. So I really can recommend that.
Thank you very much, Amira, for this. With this, we conclude our panel. I would like to thank Amira, Alia, Andreas, and Begoña for being with us this afternoon as well. And plenty of things there. I mean, for us, of course, as you know, the topic of our conference this year has a focus on technology and digitalization, and we could see actually how within the many things that have been discussed around promoting a person-centered approach, technology was mentioned as one of the key drivers. It is around AI, automation, around machine learning, and how the different digital tools have created enormous disruption and can help us think differently and approach differently innovation and person-centered support. And there is plenty out there. There's plenty that you will be able to listen to and to be able to experience when you come to the conference in Malmo, and plenty that can actually be adapted, taken back to your own context, to your own agencies and to your own teams, and be able to implement with them. So I really encourage you, if you haven't done it yet, to register with us and come, because I think it's really the place when it comes to social services and technology. So certainly we hope to see you there. And with this, I'd like to again thanks everyone, and I'd like to give the floor now to Josh to conclude this webinar.
Thank you, Alfonso, and thank you to the European Social Network for another fabulous event. This is our second year of partnership with your organization, and its ability to convene and the quality of the dialogue, I would say, is unparalleled. So congratulations to you all. I look forward to seeing many of you at the summit in Malmo. We will certainly be there, eager to learn, eager to discuss. Please do feel free to reach out to me. I placed my email again in the chat. I do want to take a moment to do a special call out, probably unusually for a European Social Network conference. There are lots of Canadians in the audience today. So a special hello to Jenya and Jennifer Mussel and Aaron Jaffrey, etc. So thanks for attending. Again, thank you all. And this has been a great discussion. I learn every time I attend one of these seminars. So I look forward to seeing you all in Malmo.
Thank you. Take care, everyone. Have a lovely rest of the day.